Namaskar to everybody, and I thank IHAR for giving me this opportunity, and Subrata ji as well. My topic is Resurgence of Savarkar in the National Consciousness. Savarkar has been a cult figure amongst us Marathi-speaking people, but today he's being spoken about at the national level. Sometimes antagonistically, sometimes amiably, but he's been talked about on all platforms. Again, I use the word resurgence because he was very much present as a guide, as an inspiration, as the leader of the revolutionary activities before freedom. For those who may not be aware, let me brief with a few examples. In the West, Bhagat Singh had published the second edition of his book, 1857 Ka Swatantra Samar. Madanlal Dhingra, who was his roommate in London, had shot at Curzon Wiley. And the statement given by Madanlal Dhingra in court clearly bore the mark of Savarkar's writings. In the East, Rash Bihari Bose and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose had publicly acknowledged Savarkar's role in and his foresight in recruiting Indians into the British Indian Army, and then they were encouraged to defect to the INA, which swelled the INA's ranks. This book was found on many INA members when they were arrested. It was like a Bible, it was like a Bhagavad Gita for them. In the South, VVS Iyer, who was just an ordinary young fashionable lad, wanting to get himself some education so that he could earn a better livelihood for himself, after coming in contact with Savarkar, was a totally changed man. He became a freedom fighter, he became a nationalist, he became the right-hand man of Savarkar, and it is under him that the 1857 book got translated into English. From the North, or from the so-called minority community, Asaf Ali in his memoirs writes that Savarkar was the deity of India House. He says he was an embodiment of the spirit of Shivaji, and he had never heard a better orator before, he says. I would go as far as saying that those who followed Gandhiji's non-violent means the inspiration must have been these revolutionaries. But the path that the revolutionaries took up was so tough that the ordinary man must be thinking, if not that, let me at least do so much for my country. You know, taking out marches, chanting slogans, and when the police came to fire or to lathi charge, simply run away. That was quite doable for the ordinary man. The contribution of several stalwart freedom fighters was suppressed after we gained freedom. It was due to parochial interests of the leaders who assumed power after independence. But like the radiance of the sun cannot be eclipsed for long, the brilliance of such Tejasvi personalities like Savarkar, Netaji ought to shine through sooner than later. And we are discussing all these people again. Keeping to the theme of the conference today, I wish to present to you the universalist aspect of Savarkar. In an address in Hindu Mahasabha, Savarkar says that even patriotism is more or less parochial and communal and has been responsible for dreadful wars throughout human history. At the same time, he warns that not all wars are condemnable as long as they protect just and fundamental rights. In a letter to his British friend Guy Aldred, he writes, although mankind must march on through nationalism and federalism to their ultimate political goal, the ultimate political goal cannot be nationalism, but it has to be humanism. And the ideal of political science and art must be a human state with the earth as our motherland, mankind our nation, and a human government based on equality of rights and duties. Again, he warns that the brilliance of such a beautiful dream, unity of mankind, etc., this ultimate hope ought not to dazzle our eyes into blindness. And before he makes a case for unity, he makes a case for survival as a social human unit or a national human unit, as he puts it. And he says that this right for survival of each such social unit or human unit is not given to anybody on a platter. It is not given. One has to prove it. Under the stern law of nature, where only the fittest survive. So to prove this not only the moral right, but also the physical right. One has to prove one's fitness, and this is usually on the anvil of war, through struggle and sacrifice that each such social unit may have to prove their fitness, which entitles races and types to survive in this world, he says. In today's world scenario, where each such social human unit or national human unit is trying to assert their identity, for example, Greeks disillusioned with Christianity are moving back to their old faiths. They are rebuilding their temples. The Parthenon is being rebuilt. The Russians for long have been asserting their ethnic identity. Even though they converted to Christianity, they then start naming their children Peter or John or something. They still have their own names, Russian names. Iranians, there's a great deal of turmoil going on in Iran, where they say they never wanted to be an Islamic state. In such a world scenario, Savarkar's views gain great relevance. As against the melting pot proposed by some so-called liberals who say that all humanity should come one and lose their identity into the melting pot, along with their culture, along with their language, along with their dress, sometimes even with their faith. So this melting pot is usually a Western model with Christian overtones, or even the Islamic ideology is the same, where the world should be converted to Islam, and then the Muslim Brotherhood will be converted into a universal brotherhood. Whereas here was Savarkar, who says that each social unit has to survive on its own, with its own identity, and then come together, forge together to form greater incorporations, from federalism to nationalism to universalism. In the foreword to Hindu Padapadachahi, which he himself wrote in English, he says that history should be read not to drag the past conflict into the present to fight it out today, but precisely for the opposite, to find the best means for the removal of that stress and strife, so that man may be drawn towards another man, because he is man, the child of the common father God, and nurtured at the breast of a common mother earth, and wield humanity in a world commonwealth. Now, for the survival of us as a social human unit, or us as a national human unit, Savarkar severely criticized the perverted way in which ethical conduct was practiced. He says it was endemic in Bharatian blood, which he describes as Sadguna Vikruti. He gives the example of Pithviraj Chauhan. Even today, with great pride, we state the example of Pithviraj Chauhan, who forgave Muhammad Ghori and set him free along with his army, with the principle of Kshama Virasya Bhushanam, of forgiveness is an ornament of the brave. But but this precept is prescribed for an equally noble and magnanimous enemy. Like in the case of Mahabharata, when both the parties agreed that a horseman would fight only a horseman, a foot soldier would fight only a foot soldier, or fighting would cease after sunset, etc. But hadn't Pithviraj Chauhan known of the misdeeds of Muhammad Ghori? He had already annexed a small portion of northwestern Bharat to his territory, and perceiving the Gujarat kingdom to be weak, since the Raja had died recently, and there was a dowager queen taking care of the kingdom because the prince was still a child. So he stealthily bypassed Punjab, Rajputana, and attacked Gujarat. Now, this would have been the worst of conduct for any Bharatian king to do. So, hadn't Pithviraj Chauhan realized that the standard of ethics, or what is perceived as ethics is different for his enemy and himself? Hadn't he known the deeds of his predecessor, Muhammad Ghazni, who had pledged to Islamize the whole world? And after victory in battle, they would either kill the entire army, coerce them to accept Islam. The women were taken as sex slaves. Even the children wouldn't be spared. They would be castrated and sold as slaves. But in spite of all this, Pithviraj Chauhan forgave him. This is what Savarkar calls as Sadguna Vikruti. And our idols, our scriptures, even Sri Krishna preached that the dharma cannot be the same in every situation, and one has to give due thought to the propriety of time, place, and person. Like during the Mahabharata, when Arjuna hesitated to aim at Karna because he was decharioted, Sri Krishna advises him that, reminds him that Karna, along with the others, had ganged up to kill Abhimanyu. And so implying that it is not adharma to kill a deceptive enemy by deception. To give another example to make this idea of Sadguna Vikruti clearer, I give another example from Savarkar's writings itself. In the Battle of Kharda in 1795, the Marathas under the young Madhavrao Peshwa had cornered the Nizam in such a desolate place that they had no access to even water. The parched soldiers began to drink from puddles that even animals wouldn't drink from. And this brought water to the eyes of the Nizam, but none to drink. And suddenly the Maratha camp was swept with this incurable disease of Sadguna Vikruti. Madhavrao Peshwa withheld the strike, allowing the fainting enemy to regain consciousness. Furthermore, he even sent sufficient amounts of water to the Nizam and his family from the stock zealously guarded for his own soldiers. Now, Savarkar says that if this disease had endured any longer and the scales of the battle had turned, the Nizam would have shown no mercy in dealing with his enemy, like how Muhammad Ghori hadn't. And sadly, even today we are infected with this disease, Sadguna Vikruti. Somebody gave me the example of Valmiki. He was saying that Valmiki was a daku, he was a murderer, he had killed so many people and robbed them of their possessions. But today we have forgiven him and we revere him as a sage or a rishi. So this is what is Sanatan, the broad vista that Swami Vivekananda presented to the world, etc. And hence we should forgive the Muslims and not castigate for the misdeeds of their ancestors, etc. He was telling me. Valmiki's parents, his children, even his wife had distanced themselves from Valmiki's misdeeds at that very moment. And in fact, that is what brought Valmiki to the path of righteousness or the path of dharma. Whereas we cannot say that about those Muslims who still consider Tipu Sultan, Aurangzeb as their idols and Fatwa-e-Alamgiri as their sacred text. Let them distance themselves. Let them condemn the misdeeds of their ancestors or their co-religionists, as the case may be. And then we as Sanatanis shall not waste a moment to forgive them. Like how Savarkar says, the moment the Britishers leave Bharat, my enmity with them will be over. And tomorrow, if they were to be ruled by any other, I would fight for their freedom. This is what is Sanatan. This is what was taught to us by our Bhagwan, by our saints, our sages. Here I wish to present to you a verse by Samartha Ramdas, who was an inspiration for the Marathas to fight for over 1.5 centuries. I don't think many people know Marathi here, so I'll simply read the translation. He says, in the whole world, such a brave Hindu, such a Hindu does not remain. Muslim atrocity is present as the Hindu is no longer monstrous. Over many days I wonder, when will they beget retribution? So he says Hindu is no longer monstrous and one needs to be monstrous to be dealing with atrocity. One needs to be super deceptive to deal with deception. And that is what is dharma. To tolerate intolerance, to tolerate atrocity is adharma. That is what has been taught to us through our scriptures by our gods, and so does Savarkar. Even the practical lessons are the same. The trains laden with corpses coming from Pakistan did not stop until 4 such went from Bharat. In the east, under the leadership of Gopal Patha, until many more Muslims started getting killed, until then they did not raise their hands and call for a truce. We still revere the ferocious avatars of our gods like Kali, Mahishasura Mardini, the Rudra avatar of Shiva. But when we ourselves have to take that avatar or to, we still shirk away from being called monstrous. Even when the need is there for us to be monstrous, we still like to be called as noble, as tolerant, etc. And that is why the carnages like Bengal keeps happening, the Delhi rise, the Kashmir exoduses, and these things come to the fore because they're being discussed in the media. But even in smaller towns and cities like Pune, a Muslim will enter a neighborhood and slowly it will be captured by the Muslims, and the Hindus will start fleeing. So this is a nationwide phenomenon actually. And until we cast away this disease of perverted ethics, or Sadguna Vikruti, we don't have a chance. Even Swami Vivekananda, in fact, has said that forgiveness to the enemy, generosity to the extent of self-sacrifice, etc., are qualities of Brahma Tej. But today the need is for Kshatriya Tej, and hence that is our dharma. And with this, that we don't forget our scriptures, we follow our dharma, and then we shall be in a position to face any crisis that we as a nation face. With this, I end my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions?
As we know that Veer Savarkar has propounded a theory of the Matra Bhumi and the Pitra Bhumi, Punya Bhumi and the Matra Bhumi. So how you can say that Hindus should, who have gone abroad, who are the NRIs, should follow the national integration and the patriotism of that country, but for them the Punya Bhumi should be in India. So according to the Veer Savarkar, how we can manage that?
I haven't come across anything written by Savarkar specifically on this issue for those people who have travelled outside Bharat and adopted another land. But from my own sanskar, from my own dharma, I can state that it is the conflict that arises with your true biological mother and your adopted mother. So both are equally reverent to you. So that is what I would say, and I think Subrato ji is a great example. Even if there's one small thing against America, he will fight with everybody else in the group, and so also he does fight for Bharat as well.
But if someone Indian Sanatan Dharmi, practice Sanatan Dharmi, is living in the country like Iran or Turkey, so how he should behave according to the mainland of that country, and from this when he's coming to India?
See, like dharma, he should be acting as per his dharma.
Right. Humanity is supreme.
Humanity is.
All right, thank you very much.